Hello, everyone. Micah Lawrence and Christopher here again, having another conversation. And we were just kind of tuning in before we jumped on here to see like kind of what wanted to come through. And I really love this particular topic, especially for right now when the world is so polarized and sort of divided and in so many different ways globally. And it can be really hard to get out of our reactions, right, with other people and repeating the same patterns over and over again that just pull us back in to feeling more wounded the way we've already been wounded in the world, or to feel responsible for things that we're not responsible for. And so we were kind of talking about how do you get out of reaction and how do you get free of all of that. And you were saying that it's the key is to reflect, to be in reflection over reaction.
Yeah. I mean, that's our natural setup is to work in our minds. So our minds are objective and subjective.
Right.
So we're always looking at everything in terms of a subject and an object. So you could be the object and I could be the subject. And therefore, it's always about a dialogue and about a reaction. So if you say something to me, then I'll say something back, And so our minds are always figuring out what we need to do in order to get the best outcome for us, And, there's a lot of self-help stuff out there about labeling, the rescuer, the martyr, the narcissist, the empath. And there's a lot of information out there, and it's very useful because we start to understand why we're doing what we're doing and why we keep repeating those patterns. And it's quite empowering for a lot of people. But ultimately, it doesn't give the formula for actually getting out of that whole story, in my opinion. So the kind of clients I have, is probably the same with you, is they've probably done a lot of self-work. They understand all the labels.
Right.
And, yes, that kind of gives them clarity about what's going on. But for me, the next step is to start really embodying what that looks like to be reflexive rather than reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two ways that we can be reflective, and that's emotionally reflective and mentally reflective. So the emotional reflection is, what does it feel like? And the mental reflection is, what does it look like? So each of us tends to be, empaths tend to be more emotionally reflective. So they tend to feel other people's pain, So if you've got your daughter is feeling sad,
Mm-hmm.
Let's give an example. I'll give an example on your behalf. Say your daughter's sad,
yeah.
And you as a mother, you want to fix it and you want to find out what's made her sad and how can you make her feel better. However, and because you're feeling the pain, you then, in a sense, because the mind is wired up to run away from pain and run towards a resolution or pleasure, which is resolution. So it's quickly figuring out, what can I do, whose fault is it, what can we do. But instead, the reflective reaction is to say, I see you're feeling sad at the moment. I can see you feeling sad. Now what that does is you're pointing at their feeling, their pain body. And when you do that to somebody else, they can feel that because they were so engrossed in the problem that they thought they had, that they've forgotten that there's a pain inside them. Mm-hmm. And that pain is actually telling them the real true meaning of pain, in my opinion, is that it's telling you that what you're believing and the reality you're living in is actually incorrect. So it's like the hump the thimble. It's actually telling you you're out of alignment with truth. Mm. So when when you're reflecting that back to your daughter and saying, it seems like you're sad, she then reflects inwards and says, oh yeah, there's a feeling in my heart that feels sad, and I need to now focus my attention on that. Mm-hmm. And when we start to feel, we start to heal. When you're feeling, you're healing. So by meeting yourself and meeting your own feelings, you are then actually healing yourself. And ultimately, that's all we can ever do, is heal ourselves. We can't actually heal each other, which sounds really weird, directly. We can heal indirectly by reflecting, but not directly. So you're giving your daughter a gift by saying, you've actually got the ability, by just focusing on your own pain,
Mm-hmm.
feel better. You know, so you've got your own internal doctor going on. So that kind of, I hope that makes sense, you
That
know.
makes sense. Yeah.
But a mother might then desist in doing that because there's a fear that if she doesn't look after her daughter and her daughter isn't happy, then
Mm-hmm.
bad reflection on her, that somehow she's failed in her duty. And that's one of the many reasons why we end up not doing it, even though it seems like a good idea at the time, you know, a good
Yes.
idea.
Yes. And that's
Uh,
a role that we're playing.
yeah, exactly. And sometimes it can be mental reflection, which is, I don't know, your husband comes home and he's very irritated, and then he starts to, I don't know, complain about something. And again, you could say, you seem very irritated at the moment, or you look like you've had a bad day, you know. And again, we kind of all do that, but that again helps them to reflect, oh yes, I'm inflicting my pain onto somebody else.
Right.
And it's got nothing to do with us. And what that does is it helps us to understand that actually whoever's in our presence is not actually, it's nothing to do with us. Actually, it's
Yeah.
not a reflection on us.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big fear, that somebody's unhappy,
Right.
especially when you're close to them, that somehow we're responsible. It's a reflection.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, what would you say on that? What would
I think what I've come to see in that same uh, way is, we we feel like, especially if we're empathic, we identify as the empath in a lot of situations, and we feel like that's what we do to love people, right? That's the loving thing to do, would
mm,
be to, sort of process that pain with somebody, or feel it for them or with them or whatever. But I've really come to see that that is actually where empathic people are still giving conditional love,
mm, mm,
because underneath the need to, say, back to the daughter situation, like to fix the fact that she is sad, is the inability to be with her in the state that she is in, which is sad, because you need the sadness to go away for whatever reason, whether that is because you don't want to feel the sadness, or that makes you feel like you've been, not a good enough mother in the moment or something like that. It's still conditional love, whereas unconditional love can be in the presence of whatever state the other person is,
mm,
and
mm.
be okay, right? Can be with it
Yeah.
and not need to run away from it, fix it, you know, control it, any of those things.
Mm,
And I think that, when empaths start waking up to the fact that it has seemed like they've been the ones that are unconditionally loving, and it's the more selfish or narcissistic people, all this lingo that we use, right, that are being, you know,
mm.
conditionally loving, it's kind of startling to think that, oh, it turns out like I'm the other side of the coin of conditional love. It just looks better on the outside according to, society and the way we've set things up, right?
Yeah. Well, it's the persona, isn't it? The persona is the mask, isn't it? It's how things look like on the outside. And
Yes.
that's what governs our behavior in a sense, isn't it? But that behavior, if you think about, say, an empath, they tend to feel quite exhausted and drained by
Yes.
other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it might be all good on the outside. I'm a loving person, I'm a caring person, and I've ticked all the right boxes. But how does it feel on the inside?
Right.
You know, there could be deep resentment to that. You know,
Exactly.
something like breast cancer, and I know this is very controversial to say this, but it is about resenting giving too much, resenting empathing too much. You
Mhm.
know, and we're put into these roles, aren't we? Mothers, carers, all that kind of stuff, where, and there's nothing wrong with caring, but it's like a thankless task a lot of the time. And with every giver, that you're going to attract a taker, you know. So there's a kind of like a balance, or there's an equation that is possibly not going to work out in your favor, because while you're busy feeling everyone else's feelings, your feelings are there for you to guide you into the right actions for you. So I will say to an empath, embrace your inner narcissist, because
Exactly. Yeah.
so we stop labeling empaths or narcissists as being bad, but actually when we can hold both paradoxical states in us, then we have cracked our own life. And the good news is that when we're whole and complete unto ourselves, well, we've got the narcissist who says it's my way or the highway, and this is what I'm driven to want and need in my world. The empath saying, I'm feeling everything, I'm feeling. And when those two can become one, then you become like a conscious creator, you know, where you start to create the life that you want. And the thing that people don't realize, and it's only when they've had the courage to do that, is that everyone around you benefits indirectly, because they get to feel the pain that they need to feel, and the pleasure that they need to feel, and the light that they need to feel, but only indirectly, not directly as a result of what you're doing, you know. And that's how we change the world for the better, you know. So everyone becomes responsible for their own stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, it's helping our children, because we think, oh, well, I've got to be responsible until they're 18, because up to that point I have to kind of make sure they're okay. Yes, in terms of practical things, of course, you know, you provide a home for them, but at the same time, you're giving them practical skills. It's what I used to say to my children, I'm giving you life skills to know how to tune in with yourself and know when something doesn't feel right or
Yeah.
doesn't feel right. I stopped becoming your authority. You learn how to become your own authority.
Exactly.
You
Right.
learn how to heal your own pain, you know. So by the time they're walking out the door as adults, they already know how to do that. They
Exactly.
never need to worry, because they've got their own GPS. So, you know, there is no kind of, you know, bad thing about that, you know. So, yeah, that's right. So, yeah, reflection for me is everything. And what I would say is that the kind of journey we're all making, and this is what we're touching on every time we have a conversation, is that we're entering into our true nature. So what is our true nature? I mean, in my world of elements of truth, is that in the outside, because we have the outside version of us and the inner version of us. So it's the outer, what everyone sees, you know, the persona, and then the inner, which is all the feelings and the memories and all the things that are unseen. And what we have to kind of align to is the fact that in our outer world, we have to stop being attached to outcomes, where it's like I just observe and I'm not attached to outcomes. And in the inside, you start to go into a state of allowance where everything's allowed to be as it is. You know, people are allowed to be sad, people are allowed to be angry. I have no truck with that. It is what it is. But in your behavior, you then reflect. So like a you know, like a lake, you know, when it's still, when there's no ripples, when it's just being still at peace, it can be the most reflective. And that's when we start to come into our own power. We'll reflect the light and the love back to the outside world. And through that, everything will be done. You know, everything will be done without me having to have my inner peace is no longer disturbed. So there's no more ripples on the lake. You know, and my will is everything gets done through me. Which again, you know, we can say as things, but in the practical solution is really keep noticing, why am I attached to any outcomes? Because being attached to outcome is basically saying, I'm going to do something that doesn't feel right at the moment in order for a hope for some better outcome in the future. That's what I call temptation. it's like being tempted to think that that's going to happen. But ultimately, you have to go more into the fact that if something doesn't feel right, then it isn't right,
Yeah.
and that has to be your guidance system,
Yes.
So it's almost like you have to let go of anything
Yeah.
where you're trying, because the word trying is already battling against what already is,
Right.
So again, we don't end up being passive lumps sitting there doing nothing.
No.
Carry on doing what we're doing, but we're carrying on being animated by the life force that's already coming through us. So
Yeah.
we're still having a conversation. It's not like we're sitting there beatifically being silent,
Yeah.
but funnily enough, our real, more authentic personalities can come out. So I can see more of the real you,
Right.
and your because your behavior is more based on your natural sort of expression, rather than the unnatural expression
Right.
that would maybe do if you were trying to get some kind of outcome,
Right.
and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people who are somehow intuitive or empathic can kind of sense that in other people as well, can't they, when
Yes.
something's authentic or not authentic,
Yes.
So so your authentic, because we've talked about this before, your essence is Stanham. So that is a kind of magnetic. So it's like bringing out the best in others. So you tend to be more yin than yang,
Mm-hmm.
and you tend to be more allowing somebody else to speak, which is what's happening now. And I'm more yang than yin.
Yeah.
So I'm nitrogen, which is quite explosive and quite free. It's an air energy. So we're different personalities,
Yeah.
but that personality is much more to do with our essence than it's to do with our programmed behavior.
Yes.
Say my old state when I was being a therapist, I would maybe be more like you know
Mm-hmm.
some more kind of reflect, not reflective, but more yin,
Mm-hmm.
listening, nodding. But then I'd find I'd be very exhausted afterwards,
Yeah.
because I was going against my natural expression.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, it might be the other way around. You might have gone more into a yang state if you were teaching people or something.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That would exhaust you.
Yep.
I
Yep.
don't know whether I'm right in saying that or
For
not.
sure. Like, yeah, when I felt like I had to build my business by like creating like courses and like all of this kind of thing,
Mm.
I could do that out of my own efforting for sure. I have plenty of things I can teach, but if it's not coming from something that's just coming through me in the moment, I would feel so drained by
Yeah,
trying to do that.
yeah. Because you're trying to create through doing,
Yes.
but your natural state is actually bringing out the best in others.
Yes.
So it's quite a passive kind of like you're drawing things out of other people.
Yeah. And the more I have, really embraced that as you and I have worked together, and like it's one of the things to me that's been the most transformational for me, the more I realize the stiller I am, and it's almost as if I'm absorbing as I'm pulling things from other people in a way. And then the less I say, the more powerful it is. So it's a waiting for me. It feels like waiting until there is something that needs to be said, that wants to be said, and then not diluting it with adding more to it by explaining or any of that. Right.
Yeah, and
It is a very backwards thing from the world, because you're building a business. It feels like, well, you need to be doing all of these things, and you need to be like, and if I'm not owning that value, I can very easily fall into the trap of like the other person not valuing what my energy is doing, because it doesn't look like I'm doing a lot.
Yeah,
But it
exactly.
is, it's the magnetism of my energetic field is what it is. And
Yeah,
that my work is the purification of that field. And the purer that is, and the bigger my sort of aura is that people can come into, the more powerful it is. That's what they're paying me for. That's the value. It's not
exactly.
the words that I'm
Exactly.
necessarily going to say.
Exactly, that's right, and that's so powerful. And it, like you say, the aura is the magnetic aspect of us as electromagnetic beings. And
Mhm.
so therefore when people are in your aura, you're bringing out the best in them, you know,
Yeah.
and that actually requires you to step out of your own way.
Yes.
So the electric, so you have to be in your magnetism, which is like, if it feels right,
Mhm.
it is right. And so and the electric is the thinking and the doing, so it's run by the nervous system.
Mhm.
And the more you get out of your nervous system, which is the thinking and the doing and running formulas, the more all that doesn't work. The magnetism doesn't work because it's interfering with the magnetism in a sense,
Yeah.
you know. It's an interference, so less is more for you, you
Yes,
know.
less is more.
Yeah, and if you think about my element is nitrogen, so you got nitrogen and explosive things like, you know,
Mhm.
nitric acid. Sorry, nitrogen is in explosives, and so for me, I know the way my energy works is that a lot of times I'm kind of detached and I go into a being state, but very occasionally I suddenly spontaneously do something.
Mhm.
I'm quite a very spontaneous person. Now, that can be quite irritating for some people
Mhm.
because it could be that I don't follow the program, I don't follow the narrative, you know. And I know over the years that's upset other people when I don't follow the narrative. You know, this is a bit where you're meant to do this. And I go, sorry, I'm an independent thinker. I'm detached from that narrative and I'm going to do something completely different.
Right.
And I'm a blue sky thinker. But that's where all my gifts and talents lie, and that's when I could bring in new ideas or new,
Yes.
you know, because like they're independent, you know. So, and it's more electric rather than magnetic.
Yes.
So I tend to be more a pushing energy rather than a pulling energy, you
Yeah.
know. So, you know, we once we start to tune in, and it's something that people naturally, you know, everyone who's listening to this can
Mhm.
maybe tune into their natural, authentic energy that just wants to come through them, you know. And we are so taught that it's not the right thing to do. You know, over the years, we will have at some point judged ourselves or been judged by other people for it not to be the right thing to do because it
Yeah.
doesn't fit in with the narrative or the program, you know. And the real trick is to pacify yourself, well, become reflective so that nobody can ever attack you on that. So when somebody's trying to say, oh, for goodness sakes, Christy, why aren't you doing more work, you
Yeah.
know, and he says, it sounds like you're in a bad mood at the moment. Just mean because you're just tuning into their feelings, so you never answer that because you're not answerable to anyone else,
Right.
you know. So they, because if anyone starts to cast aspersions on you,
Mhm.
you get to the root of the problem, which is because you can feel where it's coming from. You
Yeah.
say, well, actually, in my direct experience, when I look through the eyes of a 3-year-old, what I'm seeing is somebody who's just very irritated,
Yeah.
you know. So that then protects you, and then they stop pestering you because they don't like feeling their own pain, you
Right.
know.
So
That's
they
the
go look for somebody else to, yeah.
that's the instant karma. They're getting their fingers burnt the moment they're trying to pass on that pain onto somebody else because
Right.
they feel a bit whatever that is, you know. So that's the solution. That's the number one solution to protect your own essence, because nobody else is going to protect it, because nobody should be able to needs to protect that.
Mhm.
Because then we go into codependency, which is okay in its time, but we're running the course of no
Exactly. Yeah.
codependency.
We've evolved out of that. Yeah.
Exactly, where everyone's seen all the permutations of how codependency is no longer working, however lovely that looks like, you
Yeah.
know, however tempting it is. And it is the easy option, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
but ultimately, if you can have the courage to protect you, and the simple solution is to be reflective,
Mhm.
then that does all the work for you, you know,
Mhm.
where you can just be busy being yourself as a
Mhm.
free individual sovereign being, you know, and let that energy, because behind that essence is a wisdom that you could never know about, and you don't know the outcomes of that. But like you were saying, that becomes the revelation. And the more you start to trust your own essence, the more it will bring you everything that you're looking for, which is fulfillment and happiness, in lots of different ways,
And your responsibility at that point, like as a sovereign being, right? It's just our responsibility to like play our instrument basically, which is
Yeah,
our natural element and our essence and our energy, which
yeah,
is everything we've been programmed not to do since we were born,
yeah,
and so that's why it sounds so simple, but it is such a journey to
yeah.
get
It's
back
easy to
to.
say. Yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
super easy to say. It's definitely a journey to get back to. And something that came to me just a couple of days ago along the same line of energy, especially with empaths or people who are more yin energy, and that it's more passive, it's more like their energy is doing the work, that magnetic versus electric kind of energy, is I used to be like one of my big things that was a part of my journey is my blind spot was thinking that everyone else had pure intentions, like as I most of the time had, and realizing that people didn't always have the purest intentions of things. And that was like something that startled me over and over, like even into my 20s, like just not comprehending like how people had, you know, misaligned intentions or whatever. But and I would have this sense of like they should feel responsible for what they're creating or their power. They should use their power responsibly.
Mm,
And I was just in meditation in the last couple of weeks, and this dropped in for me, which was that the devaluing of your gifts, of your natural gifts, is a misuse of power,
mm,
as
mm.
much as using your power like to get your way, despite however it's like affecting other people, right? So
Yeah,
the devaluing, like no one can value your gifts more than you do for
yeah,
you.
yeah,
That's what we
yeah,
want when we've been
yeah.
devalued, which is an honest trauma that we probably have.
Mm,
But the devaluing of your gifts is also a misuse of power,
mm, mm,
right?
mm,
And that just, so the responsibility is to stay in that gift and to value it yourself regardless. And then you just pay attention on the external to like who's a match for that or who's not a match for that,
mm, mm,
right?
mm,
But when we devalue, like for me, I'll give you an example. Like I could look back a decade ago and how I was like trying all the time for people to value what I brought to the table. So I was devaluing what I had and giving it away in all of these places like that. It's
yeah,
like pouring water in a dark,
yeah,
a
exactly. Yeah.
pot that has holes in it,
You keep
right?
on giving. You're a giver. You're
Right.
giving. There's
So
going to
you're
be lots of
giving, and
people
so
who
you're
say,
just in the devaluing of
yeah,
my own gifts and pouring that into places that couldn't even hold it,
yeah,
didn't even know how to recognize or value it. I was misusing my own power. It was just that was then, causing problems for me more than the other person, right? But
mm.
it's still a misuse of my power.
Mm. Well, the thing is, you did that inadvertently because that's your programming. So you didn't
Right.
choose that. It's like your default setting.
Yeah.
That's the trouble. I was describe it as the Amazon Prime subscription. It's like, you inadvertently subscribe to it. And it's only when you felt the pain of that and you started to awaken to the fact that that is ridiculous what's happening.
Yes.
And we think, while we're still reacting in those situations where you recognize I just feel permanently drained, and all the people that I've helped are really not even thanking me for that. If
Yeah.
anything, they kind of stop valuing me.
Yeah.
I spoke to a friend of mine today, and she's a feng shui person, and she's telling about a really difficult client where she's doing lots of work and it wasn't being kind of like acted upon because she kind of like makes suggestions and they're not acting upon it. And I said, you're probably not charging enough money because they're just not valuing what you're doing.
Yeah.
But yet we think in order to get a business started, we have to kind of
Yeah.
pile it high and give it away cheaply.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of been known for a long time in marketing, but it's like it's more than just running that formula, but it's also really truly valuing what you're doing, because what we're giving, when we give our essence, it's like gold dust.
Mm-hmm.
but yet we are thinking it's just some stupid thing that we're doing, that because, and the reason we think we devalue what we do is because it comes so naturally and easily to us. We just think, oh, that old thing, I find that so easy
Like
to do.
breathing. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like breathing, because it's who you are. That essence is who you are. And so therefore we don't even recognize that it's of any value, because it's just too easy. Now we live in a world where there's no pain, no gain. So if
Yep.
we have to do it the hard way, but ultimately the hard way will only work for a while, because we're doing it in an authentic way, because we're trying to do something that we don't do naturally, you know.
Yes.
So again, we have to just align to what we do naturally. I mean, all these information out there is already there, isn't it? It's follow bliss, go to the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's been, you know, never fully understood or done is because the mind keeps fearing the outcomes. Well, it can't be that easy, you know, it can't be. So we have to go on like a trail. It's a bit like a river, where you go down river and you have to allow the whole process to commence. So it could take several years for your gifts and talents to reap the rewards.
Yes.
You know, it could take several years of doing things that you love doing without getting a pay packet at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, all along the way, you will somehow be supported, you know, and that's been my experience, where I've always somehow been supported in what I do, but
Yep.
it may not come in the form of a pay packet. We have a very limited idea about how that takes, how we get supported, you know. But what I would say is that in order to get out of codependency, we don't have to then be inauthentic and get into some kind of codependent relationship where we do things for other people just because we're scared that we may not get enough money or we're not going to be supported. We have to trust that we will be supported when the time comes. You know, I know when I jumped ship from being a computer programmer to a homeopath, and it was in the days when there's no internet, and so it's difficult to build up a new client base. And I remember thinking, I'm really crazy doing this. And I went for a meal in a restaurant that I really wanted to go into, but I knew I didn't have very much money. I went to the toilets and there were £20 on the floor. You know, in the olden days, that was a lot of money. So it's like when you're following your bliss, it really does work for you, you know.
Yes.
So and yeah, and for me, really today's message is, in order to support ourselves, we no longer let anyone else talk us out of that by reflecting or not reacting. So if, like, for example, you don't have very many clients, you know, as an example, so your mind might freak out.
Yes.
You just reflect on the fact, oh, there aren't very many clients at the moment. How does that make me feel?
Yeah.
Well, actually, it makes me feel quite relaxed. So I'm meant to feel relaxed at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm meant to
going through a
feel
season of relaxation, possibly. Yeah.
exactly, and I feel less burdened by other people's problems, you know. So you start to appreciate where that situation is, and by reflecting it and not having an attachment to the outcome, what happens is when we're relaxed, more of our essence can come through us.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying? Because it's almost like a hose pipe, where if we're contracted and we're very tense, it can't come through us. But the more we let go, the more the essence can come out. And that alone will do all the hard work for you.
Yes.
You know, so again, even reflecting on your own, in your own life situation, that can really become the key to you aligning to you.
Yes.
Recognizing this is what's going to happen now, you know.
And then only when we have calibrated to that essence of ourselves enough will it bring through the things that, you know, bring to us the things that we are meant to have, as long as we're like in that place of kind of back and forth, where we're feeling it a little bit and then we're back over here trying to make it happen and all that. It's like you said, with the water being completely still, and like you can see the reflection, there's all these distorted ripples in our field. So it's not bringing to us what's meant for us completely until we can really hone in that resonance and trust, which always means that there's a seeming that unknown, that gap between what we've been doing and where we're going to, where we have to, maybe we have a season where there's just like nothing is happening, but we
Mm,
have to have faith
mm,
enough to
yeah,
keep moving, even though nothing seems to be happening on the externals,
yeah,
to get over to, and
yeah.
not reach back for
Exactly,
what we
exactly. Yeah, because the
think.
mind is always looking at outcomes and saying if it doesn't look good, then it means it's not good. But the reality is sometimes in your journey as your essence, it could be that you could have something that happens that's not very good in your life. Like
Yes.
you might have to feel pain or you might have to experience something unpleasant. But really, that life experience could be asking you to dig a bit deeper inside you, to find a little bit more of your essence of what you're made of. What am I made of?
Yeah.
And there's a good saying which says when life is tough, but you're tough as well. So it's about digging deeper into who am I really? What am I really?
Yeah.
What are my resources? What else can I do?
Yeah.
What else can I do? And suddenly out of nowhere, you're unearthing a part of you that you've buried through the mind, has buried that part of you that maybe when you were 3 years old you did something that was really natural and you were told off for doing that.
Yeah.
So you've kind of buried that bit of you. So it's asking you to go back into your pain body and unearth that part of you, to bring that as part of your essence back on board again, and align to that, because by feeling it you're aligning to it. So ultimately we don't even judge our journey by what's going on. It's like being in a bus, isn't it, and looking out the window and saying, oh, I'm in the wrong country. Well, that's what's got to happen at the moment. And again, through reflection, you start to see the beauty of everything, whether it's pleasure or pain. You see the gift and the beauty of everything, because you're no longer taking it personally, and you're no longer thinking it's a reflection on you. So you no longer think, oh, I haven't got very many clients, therefore I must be a failure, I must be wrong, I must be doing it wrong.
Just what you're experiencing at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. It's just happening. Let me reflect on that. How does that make me feel? Well, secretly, I'm quite relieved that I don't have more patients, because actually I needed a bit of downtime. And that gives me more time to go within and reflect and all the rest of it, So it's keeping sort of not living in fear, basically, recognizing that there is a way out of every aspect of fear, and fear shuts the heart down. And this is where your life force or your essence comes from. So the more we can keep our hearts open, and again the reflection helps us to keep our hearts open, so we start to go into a place of compassion, which is recognizing pain, but at the same time not feeling the need to do anything about it, but being fully present with it, but no longer feeling the need to wade in and fix it or change it or do anything about it. And again, the way it looks like is we become authentic rather than like spiritual zombies. Just mean, because that's the danger of becoming a spiritual zombie. And I mean, it sounds like an awful thing to say, but that the mind could interpret it that way, where suddenly we just become beatific and everything's wonderful all the time.
Right.
That's not quite it. Just me.
No, it's not.
It's like you've still got to be you, which is you've got to be your essence, So I'm still going to be annoying the way I am, because I'm going to do random stuff. You're still going to be not the kind of all shaking, all back, but holding back and becoming the space in which everything happens. Just mean. And so again, but you become that unashamedly and without unapologetically. You're no longer answerable for that, and that's a huge thing. It's again easy to say, but it's if you can achieve that, then everything will work for you. It'll be, and the outcomes will be ultimately increasingly good.
Yes.
As time carries on, so yeah.
It could be like just an experiment that everyone could try, just for the next week or so, just
Yeah.
to practice what it would looks like or feels like in the moment, to just be reflective and notice the differences of
Yeah.
what's playing out, in any given moment. Maybe you pick a specific situation or relationship where you tend to get caught up in that reactive type, pattern, and decide, to simply be reflective in the moment and see see what's different, see what you
Yeah.
see from there,
Yeah.
and be the observer of what's happening both inside of you and
Yeah.
both externally,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it start to collect the data of what the
Mm.
difference is.
Yeah, really notice it, because for me, we have our outer and our inner world. So our outer world kind of triggers an inner feeling,
Mhm.
so something bad happens, we feel bad inside, if our minds judge that. But what we have to do is find a space in between the inner and the outer.
Mhm.
And there is a space, and that is called the mirror, right? So the mirror is, you are become a mirror to the outside. So it's like that crack between the inner and the outer, there's a space. And if you can kind of start more and more to notice, first of all, how do I feel? How can I reflect back? Because reflecting back is actually quite a simple and easy process to do.
Yes. Yes.
It's almost like going back into our innocence and look through the eyes of a 3-year-old and say, what am I seeing? I'm seeing, I don't know, somebody who's a bit grumpy, or I'm seeing somebody who's jumping up and down, a bit angry, or something like that. Keep it very, very simple and see what happens. And notice the difference. And like I say, if you can kind of identify more of the gap between the inner and the outer, which is maybe an abstract concept,
Right.
but we have to start to feel it in our, somehow physically, that's what we are. So yes, well, comments below if you have any experience, and see what that does, and we're happy to guide people through that process, to see how we can start to really cultivate that way of being. Yeah, great.
For this conversation, this was great.
Yeah, that's nice. So it's nice to talk to you, Christy, and we'll have another conversation soon.
Yeah. Until next time.
Yeah, until next time. Right, bye.
Bye.
Bye.